Hello, Facebook. Hello, YouTube. We're doing something a little different today. I have a special guest that I'm interviewing for my podcast. My podcast is Ask the Color Expert. It is available anywhere you listen to your podcast, iTunes, Spotify, the whole nine. Ian has been a friend of mine for a very long time. He is, in my opinion, one of the most talented colorists up there with the likes of Tracy Cunningham. And I mean that from the bottom of my heart. So, getting a hold of him and getting him to do this is a big deal. So we're a little bit late going live, but I wanted to do this live in my groups and on Instagram, but I also want to record the podcast. So I wanted to, cue it up here and tell you what's going on, but I'm going to go into welcome back to my podcast so that you don't think that I've completely lost my mind and forgot where I am. So we're going to start with the podcast. We're going to talk about everything color. When I tell you, most of the nuggets that you learn from me came from this man, from my own formula for my own hair that changed my entire life for the better, to going lighter around the hairline, to adding warmth into my shades EQ glaze. There's so many things. I could write a second entire book on Ianisms, and it is my goal to get Ian to write his own Ianism book. We're going to talk about that too. But he is amazing, and I'm so happy he's here. So let's get started. So I'm going to start with here, Ian, and introduce you like we're on the podcast. Sound good?
Sounds great.
And your salon right now is Navy, just the word Navy?
Yeah, it's Navy is the name, and then kind of it's like below it just says a hair studio, but like our technical
Navy,
name is Navy.
Okay, is that because guys in the Navy are hot? Is that where that came from?
That was one of the contributing factors.
Awesome. All right. So, welcome back to the Ask the Color Expert podcast. Today's special guest is a dear longtime friend, the one and only Ian McCabe. He has been a commissioned stylist, a salon owner, back to a commissioned stylist, and now back to being a salon owner. And I love his story. But what I love the most about him is his generous heart when it comes to helping other hairstylists master hair color. Ian, thank you so much for being here. This is such a treat. Welcome to the podcast.
Thanks for having me. I'm excited to be here.
You are really hard to get a hold of. You are one busy man, but you always make it look so effortless. So, along our journey as friends, you had shared, I want to open up my own salon and I want it to be this and I want it to be that. And I was in the throes of really not loving being a salon owner. And I was a big negative Nelly saying, no, don't do it. Don't do it.
Yeah.
Not only did you do it, but you did it next to the Ritz-Carlton in Washington, D.C., like the hardest market, the most expensive rent. You went for it.
Yeah.
And I'm so proud of you. The salon was absolutely amazing. And your clientele was very high level. Like you did everything right.
Yeah.
And then came the big dirty word, the C word came and changed everything. And I know your story has changed since then. So I will let you speak to what happened from salon ownership to where you are now with your new baby, Navy, the color studio.
Yeah, so I think the last few years have been interesting, for myself. I think for many other stylists, owners, I think our industry, as most industries were, have changed. I think with that comes some for the better, some for the worse, probably, But so I, started out like most people, a commissioned stylist for most of my career. Then there was no, I kind of hit this wall of like not feeling like there was anywhere I really wanted to work or that I really felt like I could grow. So I, I don't know that I at that time like really wanted to own as much as I wanted to work in a place for myself, that was inspiring, that had where people could grow, where we could be a part of something, a team, So I think I created it out of necessity. I mean, I was young, I was 26. So yeah, I think that's how it really came about, And so I did that. We had a lot of success. We opened a second location, the pandemic hit, but I think through all of that, I there was a lot of things that happened. I think one of those, which I don't always know that we talk about is mental health. So I think like COVID hit, my mental health was really in a horrible place. I had 30 some employees. We decided to close. It was probably the hardest time in my life, I think, for many reasons. I think I had built something in some ways that I didn't, love anymore, because I think I was scared to make certain decisions. I think I was operating out of fear. I was trying to be everything to everybody at times. I think there was so many factors that played into that. And then COVID. So I learned a ton. We grew really fast. We had a ton of success. Then I went back to, being a commission stylist. I really worked on my mental health, and worked on things that I probably never had addressed, and tried to find like peace more for myself, not just working my life away. So I kind of did that for a little while, changed to another salon. Again, kind of realized, while I loved the people I worked with, I loved my bosses, I still was missing that feeling of having a space that I felt like, was aesthetically the way I wanted, had some of the core values I believed in. Organization and order and cleanliness are all things that like are so high on my list. They, having a place where, people really wanted to go and take it to the next level, not just people that were comfortable coasting. And, not to say that was all that was where I was working, just in general, I really wanted to have a space that, like my original, just on a much smaller scale. So I decided to open another location, much smaller this time. And so, now I'm in that. And I think, I have a lot of perspective. I've learned a ton about myself, about the industry. But I do believe, I think I think commission salons will come back. I think people are going to be tired of working alone. I think for a while people have these connections on Instagram, and I think in some ways that maybe helped give people a connection when they're not having it behind the chair. It's like, I'm not working with anyone, but I talk to all these people in my industry online, and I think for a while that may be okay, but I think at some point we will, like everything, things rebound, and I think at some point you will start seeing some of these commission salons come back. I think you will start seeing owners step up and provide education for their staff, and grow the team, not just have a team, but growing teams, investing in other people. I think if salons are going to make it, that's what they have to do. I think we have to invest in the next generation. I think less people are entering our industry. I think there's a lot of competition out there. We see behind all the closed doors that we never used to see. When you and I were, when I first met you, and years before that, we didn't get the look behind the curtain that we get now in so many ways with Instagram and stuff, right? So I think there's a different expectation. It's like people can see what else is out there. So I think you really have to stay committed to the team if you want them to stay committed to you.
Yeah, I think too, you talked about fear, and that fear is always behind everybody's feeling stuck in some way, right? It's the fear of failure, the fear of change, all of those things. But with salon owners right now, commission salon owners, I can speak to that as a salon owner. With the suites, in Pennsylvania, I never had that issue because suites weren't legal, booth rent wasn't legal. We never had that threat to our businesses. But now I have to say, if I was starting out as a commission owner right now, I would feel much more threatened by how much we have to put into. I watched you train your staff And you gave such a level of education that I have not seen in any other salon, myself included.
Yeah.
You were so driven and so good behind the chair, but you also never let a minute go by that wasn't a teachable moment, that you would stop and point out to one of your associates, like, look, I'm doing this because of this. Like, I shadowed you for a day. I learned more shadowing you in one day than I did in 10 years running around to, different classes.
Mm-hmm.
So it really stings now that we can put all of that love and energy into a newbie, and we love it because we want to see them thrive and soar and be confident. But just knowing that, I spend a lot of time on forums, more time than I should. And I always leave with a headache and a pain in the back of my neck because everyone says, well, I'm just here for a couple months to grab a bunch of clients so that I can go into a suite. They're very forthcoming with their plan. It's not, with you and I, we gave that salon that we worked in. We didn't ever intend to leave. We just felt like we got to hit a ceiling that we couldn't grow anymore. Now it's people right out of beauty school are like, okay, well, I'll work in a salon for like a month or two to like get some, clients and get some experience. But I'm going right into a suite. So I think that's really going to hurt the whole system where it's going to be like, oh, commission salons are awful. You and I both know the overhead that we have, and there's only so much. Like, I look back at the salon that I left and I think, yes, I'm glad I left. Yes, I'm glad I made all those changes, but it wasn't their fault. It was in a building where their rent was astronomical. Like, they could not pay me any more commission. And to your point, not everyone wants to be a salon owner. So they're still busy. They're still thriving without me. I'm thriving without them. Like, there's always the next step. There's always opportunity. But I think that disconnect now between commission salon and suite, I was dying. I almost called you. You're always so busy. I hate to bother you, but people were freaking out because they just found out they owe taxes. The suite people. I was literally crying, laughing at the comments.
Oh, I know.
They're like, I did $60,000 in my suite. Yay. I'm so excited. And someone said, I hope that you put money aside for your taxes. And they were like, what do you mean? What do you mean?
Oh, I know.
And someone said, well, they did the math and they're like, you owe $23,000. She's like, what? Are you kidding me? I don't have $23,000 to pay for taxes. So like,
oh, I know.
The owners of the suite model they're realtors, they're investors. They're not even hairdressers. They're not teaching, and nor do they have to. I'm not saying they have to, but these people are like, oh, I signed a lease. I have my own business. They put on Instagram all the cool decorations, the bohemian style, or the the tool cabinet for that cool vibe. And they're all excited about the decorations, but they don't know anything about business. They don't know anything about marketing. They don't know anything about taxes, about any of those things. And I'm just like, so I'm finding, as you're saying, I think it's going to circle back and they're going to be like, oh crap, that was not the, rainbows and sunshine up my ass. That was brutal because now I have to get my own supplies. As an educator, the biggest thing that drives me crazy is when one of my people in my program says, well, I didn't have that about a shade. And I'm like, well, what do you mean you don't have it? And they're like, well, I didn't know she was getting that color. I'm like, you don't just have color in your suite. So they have like 4 bottles of color and they run out the morning of. I'm just like, oh my gosh.
Oh, I know.
Drives me crazy.
I mean, I think it's interesting because I think some of these people don't even know that. Like, it's one thing to not know information, and then it's another thing to not care to ask about it for information, right? And I think it's actually where a lot of people just don't know, right? It's not like that they know that there's these certain tax things or these things. They don't even know that some of these, how these things work, and they don't even, so how would they ask about something they don't even know exists, or they don't even know is a problem, right? Until it really happens to them. So I think there's a lot of having, a lot of these people having to learn things really the hard way really quickly. I think it, there's always going to be people, because even before the suites, you know what I mean? It's like there was people that were going to work there for a little bit and then they were going to go work somewhere else. There's always going to be those people, right? It's like they're always going to exist. I think I think it's important that, as salon owners, we interview well and make sure we get the full story from some of these people. I think it's important we, see how they work with others, because, people that are really there for the long haul are going to be team players. They are going to go above and beyond, they are going to want to help for the greater good. So I think it's a two-way street, right? It's like if I'm investing in you and taking time to educate you and all those things, this is what I need from you. I need you to work hard. I need you to show up on time. I need whatever it is. So I think it's like laying out expectations from day one. I think, what I've learned in teaching sometimes is allowing people to I don't know if the word is like to struggle a little bit in a way that like not giving them all the answers so they find some of it on their own. I think that has definitely been something I've evolved in my teaching. I feel like I used to give it all away, and I think it would keep some people needing their hand held for longer. So I think, it's empowering them to get to some of these decisions on their own, some of these answers on their own, allowing them to see what, that little misstep on their part really turns into, whether it's color or with a client, whatever, right? It's like allowing little things like that. Nothing terrible, but, allowing little things to kind of happen a little bit more. So that way they learn the lesson themselves. I think, I don't know, I think if there's enough to go around and it's just about finding the right people. And along that way, we're going to, of course, have the few that don't make it, that come, that take what they can and leave. And I don't know that that's any different than it's ever been. You know what I mean? I think
Right.
that will
I agree.
always be what it is. And I think we just have to like not get our feelings hurt about that, because that is the name of any game, of any business, So if they don't want to be there, I don't want them there.
Right.
And I always feel
So
like
with color, let's talk about color with what you said about teaching. I love that point that you brought up, because I always say, it's that saying, you can teach a man to fish or you can give them fish and they're going to eat the fish and then they're going to be hungry again. So what I'm seeing, the trend being, I backed off from a lot of the forums because people get so nasty. I get a lot of trolls that like come at me big time when I answer the way that you and I would answer. So a girl 2 days ago said, what is M in Shades EQ? And the answers underneath, I copied and pasted, because that's where I get all of my content for what podcast I want to do. Because when I see what's out there and the information and how twisted it is, I'm like, oh my gosh, this has to be talked about. So somebody said mahogany. I Googled it and it said mahogany. Well, M can be mahogany, or it can be mocha, or it can be matte, which was the answer in Shades EQ. So underneath that, a girl said, the person said, my client's hair is orange. And this girl said, oh, when my clients have orange hair, I use the GN series. It works great. And I commented like, yeah, GN's amazing. But she said that her client's hair is orange. And when you have orange, you need blue. And she said, I've been doing hair for 40 years and I use GN and it works great. And I'm sticking, like, got very combative. And I was just like, I'm not going to argue with this person. So then lower in the feed, she says, I said, I just said separately, green is meant to cancel red, blue cancels orange. And she commented, well, red has orange in it, and that's why it works. And I was like, okay, mic drop. Like, I'm not even going here. So it's very frustrating when I come from a place of service, honest to God. And so do you. Like, you've never held back anything from me or anyone else. When you teach at my retreats, it's like Elvis is in the building. Like, people follow you down the hallway. You can't even go to bed at the end of the night. Like, people just are rapid fire questions. And you literally are so exhausted and will stand there and answer every single question and never give an attitude, never act like a diva. You are just like nonstop answering, but not a one-word answer the way we've gotten from some people that you and I both follow in the industry, where they make you feel like crap in their answer. It's such a genuine explanation of the why behind your answer. And I know that you're busy with your salon, and I know that you love to teach, but I know teaching is a whole different animal, and it can be pretty, it can be intense and a lot.
Mhm.
But I would like to see more of you in our industry. And I'm going to be talking to you after this interview. I have some ideas, but just your mind, you're like the hair color savant is the only way I can explain it, because you and I laugh all the time. Like both of us are constantly trying new lines. We're like
Yeah.
the FOMO king and queen, the Sonny and Cher of FOMO.
Yes.
We're like, oh girl, you're like, girl, I just heard about this new line. Have you
Yeah.
tried it? And I'm like, no, how about you? And the difference between you and I is I am such a safe wimp. I wait for you to actually do it on a person, and then you tell me it's amazing, and then I do it. That's the type of colors that I am. Where you and my friend Johnny are like, give me it. You're just like, give me it. Let me put it on. Then you're like, oh crap, because you know how to fix it. And that is the problem in so many of the issues in our industry, is not really understanding the product, how it actually works, why it's the how, the why, the when, the what, the main questions that you need to ask yourself. You look like you just pick up a color and put it on, but there is so much thought in that beautiful mind of yours. You're like, okay, I'll never forget. And I teach this all the time. When I did a model with you and you brought it up, one of my issues was I kept rinsing it too soon. I would panic when there was still too much yellow because I was afraid it was going to go completely white and fall off the head. And you're like, no, she needs a couple more minutes. That was a huge lesson for me, because 99% of the issues in the industry are too much brass because everyone did what I did and panics and takes it off. Yeah. So most glazing and toning issues are lack of lift issues, improper lifting issues. Then you really blew my mind. Like I was like in a daze for days after I left your salon. I was in a daze before I got there. Remember, my suitcase never made it.
Oh yeah.
I took the train and left my suitcase in my car. So you explained to me why you were doing 9P, 9RB, and clear. I was like, what? RB, why? You just took the time to take all that warmth out of her hair. Why in God's green earth are you putting RB back in? And you took the time to explain to me the why. And that changed my entire game on glazing. I have a whole chapter in my book that says, don't go glazy crazy, because every time I glaze someone, I completely took away all of their highlights and covered them up. And I was like, why are people glazing so much? You just did all that work to highlight. So now I say, I stopped, my book, I'm not making any more copies, and I'm going to write a second book because everything has changed from that day with you. So it's knowing those nuggets of Ianisms that didn't just happen overnight. Like you are always the student. You're not just the teacher. You're not just the salon owner. You are always, always the student. And that's why I love you.
Yeah. I mean, I think you have to be a student. It's like I take classes all the time. And one of my first mentors always said this, like, if you just learn one thing, it was worth it, right? And sometimes that one thing reaffirms why I do things the way I do, right? Maybe that one thing challenges why I do things the way I do. Maybe that one thing affirms why I do the things the way I do. It's not always like, sometimes I learn what not to do. Sometimes, I see a new technique. Sometimes it's something more, a deeper dive into the chemistry. I mean, there's so many facets to this industry. We can always learn more. But a point you said that I find is so scary in this industry is that I can't tell you how many times I teach classes, or someone comes to shadow or something, and people do not understand the products they are working with. I mean, they don't know what the numbers are in their system. They don't know what the 0.1 actually signifies. They don't know what the 0.2 does. They've never swatched any of the colors themselves. So they have no clue if any of this is actually true, because I personally do not believe, there is no, hair color does not have blue in it. It doesn't have green in it. It doesn't have red in it. It's all chemicals, colorless molecules that when developed turn into a shade that looks like it would be X, Y, or Z. But there's no blue or yellow or red in the tube of color. It's just chemicals, right? It's like that alone is like very, very mind-blowing.
Very mind-blowing.
But there is no thing in it. The reason we have some of these numbering systems and values is to is to help people understand what this shade will look like, or what this family kind of looks like, so they have a better chance of getting a predictable result. But I've swatched many a colors, and they say it is a blue, and then you swatch it and you're like, this is a very warm shade, you know what I mean? Or you swatch this shade, and it's like, oh, it's a green series, and it looks, it's like a level 9 matte, and it actually reads very pink, right? So it's like, or like kind of violet. So it's like there's no green.
Oh, hold that thought. The people that are listening to the podcast are not going to be able to appreciate this, but for the people who are watching us record this podcast live, I want to share this. So this is 3 different brands of Demi that I swatched. And when Ian's referring to swatching, it's taking human hair, samples and trying a color out and before you put it on someone's hair. So this was Redken Shades EQ, Joico, and Colora color gloss. Look at the difference in those results. They were all 9V. Every single one was the same shade. So if you don't swatch it and see, one was like almost purple, one was like green. I think it was the Colora that turned out very green. But that's to Ian's point. This is what you discover when you take the time to be the student and don't depend on going to an in-person class where someone's up on stage just talking about these things. Physically do the swatch yourself. It is the best class you will ever have in your entire career.
I think also it's like people are so willing to go spend all this money on classes. I'm like, why are you taking a class if you have not even done your homework yourself?
Yep.
Watch your entire line. And I did learn this from Dennis Gebhardt, with he uses, on top of that, he also uses these little cotton pads to swatch it out.
The muslin, the muslin
to see what's in each tube, you know what I mean? Because there's no contribution in a white cotton or muslin strip. So I think everyone should be making their own swatch books. Everyone should be doing that well before they are taking any classes. Because if you, it's like a mechanic going in and doesn't know how to use any of their tools, has never, picked any of them up before. It's like, that would never happen, right? It's like you wouldn't be able to get a job. But in our industry, people could not understand the color line, not take the time to get to know it outside of their clientele, and then wonder why they're having all these issues. It's like, you can't take everyone else's word for something if you haven't even done the work yourself. It's like, why are you taking my word for it?
Exactly.
You know what I mean? Why are you taking Redken's or L'Oreal's or Wella's or whoever's word for it? It's like, chemists are making this. A marketing team is making this. We need to take back the power of knowledge and swatch this ourselves. Only then will your eyes start opening. And then when you take those classes, you can actually understand the material of the techniques or of the formulation or things like that. But trying to understand formulation with a product line you don't even understand, and the amount of people that don't even know how to mix their color line or know, certain things, or that the high lift tints are mixed differently than the regular series, or that there's mixed tones, or that they don't know what the 0.1 is or the 0.2, or the M is or the C is, or it's like the C could be copper and another line it could be cool. I mean, there's so many facets to this, and it's like, how are we not taking the time to do that? And I really hope that is like one of my biggest things I've always been saying: swatch it out. When in doubt, swatch it out. Even test strands, I'm like, when in doubt, test it out. It's like, don't be scared to take the extra few minutes to save your ass in the long run. It's like, I still do it at times. If I'm in a corrective case, it's like, it only helps me on the back end,
Absolutely. I interviewed Sonia Dove during COVID I think it was for Revival, and I was so impressed. She's had, probably 10 plus more years than you and I in the industry. And the first thing she said is, do a test strand. And I was like, wow, she's still doing test strands, because no matter how much knowledge you have, hair can be completely unpredictable. And you don't know what lies beneath. Yes,
Yeah,
there's
it's an imperfect
layers
science.
underneath of things that they've done that you have no idea and you can't see on the surface. Let's talk about gray conversions. I'm sure you've had a few in DC because everybody hopped on the I just want to embrace my gray. And to your point, I'm glad that you brought up the hair is not paint because that's the number one thing that I teach in every class is hair. Hair color does not work like paint. This
Exactly.
is gray nail polish. If I put this nail polish on my nail, on my white nail, it will be gray.
Hmm.
If this was a tube of, silver, Joico or Schwarzkopf or any brand, silver, and I put it on my hair that has that little bit of urine yellow from my nice hard water here in Florida, I am not going to get silver. I'm going to get like a greeny, gross color
Yep.
because the silver in the tube is trying to get rid of that yellow. And that's the best that it can do. It can't get me to silver.
Yeah.
So when your clients ask about silver conversions, do you try and talk them out of it? Do you say this is a challenge and roll up your sleeves? What's your take on the whole gray
So,
conversion?
I mean, I've definitely done them. I would say, like, I'm okay to do them. I'm not, for me personally, like, I'm not against if people want to stop coloring their hair. When people ask my opinion, do you think it, I'm like, do you think it will look good? I'm like, yeah. I'm like, my personal preference is I am not a huge, like, gray lover. That's just not my thing. I think it can work on some people beautifully. It's not my preference on most people, but if someone really wants to do that, I totally get not wanting to touch up your roots or have the maintenance. I'm like, fine. I would say I'm not when some people are like, well, let's just kind of do in between, like, let's just get it to gray and then we'll do a few blonde highlights. Like, I'm not a fan of that as much. Like, I think the gray usually looks best when we kind
Go
of get
go
it.
one or the other. I
Yeah, when
agree.
we kind
Yeah.
of get it to its place, because especially if you don't want maintenance, it's like to only want to maintain it 4 times, like, twice a year with a few lowlights or highlights. Sometimes I think as it fades, it just looks like it's like it just looks better to leave it alone. So if their goal is really to get to a point of not having to touch it long term, then I'm fine doing that. I think it's a very long and expensive in time and product and money for the client. It is a long process. It's like depending how much color they have built up, depending on where we're starting, depending on how much salt or how much pepper is in their hair. All of those things come into play. Sometimes some people want to do it gradually, some people want to go all in. So I think it depends on the health of the hair. If there's a client recently that she wanted to go white, and so some hair definitely had to be cut because there had to be. She has very curly hair, so definitely considerable cut happened to make sure that, like, it could be done. So and keep the curls intact. So I think it's fine. I think it's just, if someone's a level 2 and trying to lift that out to white, the hair is going to be destroyed. So it's like, maybe you start softening the formula. You slowly start working the base color lighter. Maybe it's like, okay, this is over the next year, we evolve it for some people. Because otherwise you have to get into color removers, then bleaching or lightening, putting pepper back in. It's like there's a lot to it. And every
I
case
know.
is
I
different.
think clients go that direction because they think that it's a quick, completely no maintenance thing. And then I'll see the pictures and it's like level 4 color. There's just a retouch amount of growth and then level 4 color. And they're just like, I want it today. And I'm like, okay. I'm going to put you on the spot now because I know you don't like to brag about your pricing. You have always been my hero when it comes to not apologizing for charging properly your worth. That is something that is really an epidemic in our industry. I talk to people every single day that are stuck in absolute fear of raising even $5. So I'm going to put you on the spot for entertainment purposes to make people understand where it can and should be. What has been your highest ticket ever in one service, ever in your career?
My highest ticket. I mean, I don't know my highest ticket, but maybe if like someone paid my day rate, I guess.
So like a big
So
project where you had to go in on a separate day, like a gray conversion, something like that.
yeah, like if it was like a day rate or if I had to travel, or a day rate or something, I would say, my day rate, I guess, would be the highest. I would say that, I mean, do you want the
Spill the
number?
tea, dude. This is a
I mean, I
podcast.
would say like, anywhere from like 2,000 to 2,500 if it's a day rate.
That's awesome.
Yeah, I would say like 2,500 is technically my day rate.
And then compare that to your average ticket. So what is your average in your studio right now? Client comes in, they're your 12 o'clock. What does the average end up being? And I know you're color only, you don't do the cut. So I want to preface that with anybody listening that you're specializing in color.
So like my single process, for example, is 220 without a blow dry. So with the blow dry, with my assistant does it, it brings it to 290. So I would say that's like a common ticket. Yeah, I would say that's like a common ticket for like a single. My highlights, like if someone gets a full highlight, I think that's like 395 and then 70 for a blow dry with my assistant. So I would say those are two common tickets behind the chair for me.
Now I know in your first salon you didn't even have foil in the building. You were the king of balayage. Has that changed now?
Yeah, I
Or
do.
you still do mostly paint?
I mean, I mostly paint, but I definitely do a few foils. I would say I have like probably, I mean, I think there's a place for it, it's like, and sometimes there's like, I have a client or two that have a base and they just realistically, like I need a fair amount of lift. They don't want to wait for like the processing of the base and then taking that off. And, so there's a couple people I maybe do it's not my favorite way to do things at all, but like, they just want a few lighter bits, but their base is light and, maybe I need to use foil to make sure I get the clean lift without it interfering with touching the base color. I can do the foils first and then do the base around it. Or if I don't have time on my schedule and they really need a highlight and a base, it's like versus trying to find two separate appointments on my book, I can just squeeze it into one. So yeah, I have a few people I foil. I would say like definitely under 10 people behind the chair, but I think there's definitely a place for it. And I think foils can be beautiful. I just personally like the aesthetic of painting. I enjoy the process more. It's just what I've spent my time, I've devoted my time to most of my career.
You make it look so effortless when you paint. I love watching you. It's like watching art. It just looks so effortless, and it's not. Well, I remember when I first met you was at the Nancy Braun balayage class. I didn't have a single fingerprint left on my fingers. I could have killed 17 people on the way home and not gotten arrested. It literally, there was cotton up my nose. There was cotton all over my apron. I was cursing the entire time. And I'm thinking, and it's to the point that we shared in the beginning of this podcast, when you're not growing and you're not learning new things, it's easy to get stuck in your comfort zone. I was totally booked all the time. I had my own salon, booked every day behind the chair, but I wasn't doing creative work like that. It was robotic foils, robotic retouch. Everything was robotic. And you start to burn out and feel like this career is not for you because you're not getting into new techniques and challenging yourself. So I remember thinking, why did I do this to myself? Then when I wanted to become an educator and I went to a public speaking event, the first day I was doing the Ben Stiller something about Mary snot cry the whole way home from the first day of the public speaking event. I was so uncomfortable. And I went home and my friend was with me and I was like, why did I do this to myself? Again, I have a successful salon. I'm booked every day behind the chair, but that wasn't the point. The point wasn't to stay comfortable and be in that, perfect bubble of minimal success that felt like great success. but something inside me kept saying, there's more, there's more, there's more. And being so uncomfortable in every single situation that I've had the biggest, most impactful growth of my life, and I know you as well has been when we were like sitting in a dirty ass diaper of pity. Like, why did I do this? This is so uncomfortable. I hate this. Why am I trying to learn this new technique? Like, it's hard, right? But you don't get to that next level unless you do the hard stuff. It's like anything in life, you know?
Oh yeah. I mean, one thing I think of is, it's kind of a funny story is, so, I mean, you know this, I use Formisi a lot for my color, right? I have for many years. So many years ago, this is a long time ago. I knew that Tracy Cunningham was using Formisi. This was before she was really what she is today. Like, she was, she was working, I think, maybe at Neil George or John Fried, I don't know, something. So it was before she was as big as she was now. And I had met her at this event in New York. It was called Hairdressers Against AIDS. It's probably like 2008 or something like that, maybe. And so I was like, I'm going to use Formisi. I've been L'Oreal for years and years and years at this point, and, some Wella. And I was like, I'm going to learn Formisi. So I go and use it, and it is like so thick and so different. And then, I get the whole line because I'm all in. And I am like giving these redheads like hot roots, like fucking out of control. And I'm having to like go back and gloss everyone's roots at the bowl. I'm like sweating, but I'm like, I am going to beat this. And then one day I'm like, fuck this. I am not doing this stupid ass line. And I get rid of all of it. Yeah. And then like a month or two goes by, and it just sits with me. Like, I'm not letting that damn color line.
I'm not a quitter, goddammit.
So then I get the whole color line back again. And I take a class this time. And, the class tells me information that was different than what I was used to doing with L'Oreal. I mean, I was adding gold, I was adding all the things, but it was still so much more intense than like anything I had worked with. And again, this was like, as a much younger stylist. And so I do it again. And then it was better, but there was still a few things that they taught me that were really not right. And then I like kind of fizzle out. I'm like, well, I'm not using that anymore. And I like kind of, go back to what I know. And then I'm like, this damn line is not gonna fucking beat me. So I get it all again. And I, this time, like, swatch everything, do all the things I needed to do. Swatch it, take the time. And I mean, and this line took me, first of all, longer to apply because I was used to doing things with a bottle, or I was using Logix or L'Oreal. And I was, it took me much longer to apply. It had to be laid flat a certain way. I had to do all the swatching and all of that. And I really eventually conquered it. But I mean, the amount of sweating I did getting to learn that line and having to like be behind because it took me longer to apply, and now I have to go back in and freaking recolor the roots at the bowl because they're neon and all of these things. It's like, it was so uncomfortable, but once you got to the other side, it feels so good to like stick it out, and to get it all the way, or if it's a color correction, it's like not quitting at the very end. It's like running a marathon and stopping right as you see the finish line. It's like, just go all the way. So I think any of those really uncomfortable moments are so important for us to just stick it out,
I love that. And I love that you shared that you were blaming the line, because yes. I have 52 million screenshots from forums of people saying, what's the best hair color for covering gray? Mm-hmm. My color is not covering gray. And I'm just like, the color is covering gray. You are not formulating properly. So it's so easy to blame the product and not blame ourselves. And you owned it, that it was you giving the hot roots. For me, she didn't do anything wrong. It's meant to be a very rich, they're known for their red. They're known for their super cool colors that fight, the warmth that comes in the hair. So all the things that you now love about that line drove you crazy because that's what made that line different. And you
Yep.
weren't used to different. You were used
Yep.
to the norm. The
Yep.
only thing that you and I ever disagree on is your use of basic white.
Oh yeah.
You literally, you're putting it on my hair, and I'm just like, I feel like I'm having an experience where I'm going against every fiber of my being, putting this on my hair. And I get why you use it, because it will take the paint off of walls. It's so
But I mean,
damn strong.
it's funny because it's actually some of these new ones, like it smells strong, but like if you look at like how some of these new ones are lifting, I mean like the Schwarzkopf, like Blonde Me, that stuff
Well, I don't like that either. That stuff
next
scares
level
me.
how quick
Yeah.
it works and how aggressive it is. Like I feel like it's just the dust of the BW2 that is so aggressive. But it's like there's a lot of these people like, you know, at least when I went
Louis
there, like
Ari,
Sharon
I know, is
Duran still
really big
used
on.
it, Marie Robinson, that Rita Hazan, like all these people, Louis Licari, Brad Johns, like all these like OG people in the industry used it for so long. And I think I don't know, I think it's definitely a line that, like anything, it's just preference,
Yeah. It's funny. Like when Ian gives me his list of products that he needs, it's very specific because he has his favorites. So that leads me to the next question, because I could literally have this go on for 4 hours. Like once I get you, I want to just keep talking to you, but I know people's attention span for a podcast is not much longer.
Yeah.
What is your like ride or die if you and I knew that we had to get on a boat and we were going to be on a deserted island for the rest of our lives and be the two colorists on the island to keep people looking semi-normal that are stranded, and we can get those two things shipped in on weekly, like we'll never run out of them, but it's only two products, not two shades, like literally two categories, like bleach, demi, permanent, all that. What would be your two absolute deal breakers that you would have to be the island colorist?
So like categories. So I would say lightener and a demi.
Me too.
That would always be my go-to. If I couldn't choose. I mean, I love permanent color. I use a lot of it behind the chair. But if I could only pick two, I mean, yeah, I would need, to do highlights, I would need lightener. I would, a demi to blend gray to tone the highlights. There's a lot of ways you could
jazz up a brunette with the demi.
Yeah.
You could blend gray. You could change the tone.
Yeah.
So my final question is, if you could leave the listeners with one nugget. I know it's so hard because you have so many Ianisms, and I could list 20 of them. But for you, coming from you and your heart as a true champion for hairstylists and amazing colorists, what's one nugget that made the biggest impact on your life and your career as a colorist? That one little tip that you went to, you might have sat in a 4-hour class and you came out with that one thing, and then that just completely skyrocketed your success and changed everything for you.
I mean, I think one thing that I just always go back to is, and I'm not even sure where I read it or saw it or whatever, but it's like we can only do 3 things to hair. It's like people get so worked up about things, right? It's like we can lighten, we can darken, we can change the tone. So it's like that's all we're doing at the end of the day, right? So if we're covering gray, we're darkening it, most likely, or we're lifting, or we are changing the tone of something, but that's all we're really doing. And when people get so worked up and like they just are like, I don't know, and 2 months this, and then it's like, okay, let's just break it down on like the simplest terms imaginable. Like, do they want it lighter than where they are, or do they want it darker, or is the tone off? You know what I mean? So if we're highlighting, we're lightening, and then we may be adjusting the tone. It's like, if you really just get rid of emotion and we just use pure logic, it's not always as hard as we make it,
100%. I love that. And I completely agree. The first slide of one of my most popular trainings on formulation is exactly that. But I have 4 things. I say you can lighten, you can deepen, you can change the tone, you can cover gray. I just added cover gray, but that's it. And then corrective color is a combination of all of those things.
Yeah.
So when you really step back and realize, what each category can do and can't do, and you can narrow it down to what you're using in each situation, it really becomes that much simpler. So I'm going to speak for you and say that you are all going to be seeing more of this man, because I'm going to drag him out of obscurity and into doing more education, because he really is a gem and a gift to our industry and has made an impact, I know, on myself, on my own staff, as well as every single one of the members of my Hair Color Secrets Insiders. They get so excited when they hear that you're going to be a guest in the group or that you're doing a special training. One of your redhead techniques is in the training. So I love you. I love our friendship. I love what you do. And I love how simple you make everything, how you have no ego whatsoever. You have a lot of reasons to have an ego as a, celebrity colorist, but no matter what level of success I've seen you accomplish, you have never changed for a second of who you are as a human being, as a fellow hairdresser, and as a friend. So I love you for that.
That's quite a big compliment.
I don't like very many people.
I know.
And you're one of the ones that I love.
I know, that's saying a lot.
Because I love authentic people that are true human beings, and you're one of them. So thank you, my friend. And thank you guys for watching this live podcast. We've never done this. And I knew if I could do it with anyone, it would be Ian, because anyone else, if I told them we were going to go live, would back out of doing it, because they think when they agree to be on my podcast, they think that I actually edit, but I don't edit. So doing it live or doing it recorded really doesn't matter, because
live doesn't bother me at all.
Yeah, I just love real. Like, your dog was barking. So what? You have a dog. You love dogs. Like, I have my son's dog here. If he barks, okay, the dog was barking. Like, I don't polish anything up and make it look different than what it is, because some of the coolest, most fun things come up with us just being ourselves. I always say to Ian, Sonny and Cher worked because they were so, like, she was so tall and he was little, and he had this terrible voice and she had this crazy cool voice, and it just worked. And I always say we are like the Sonny and Cher of hair color. Like, if we can be ourselves on a stage and curse and talk the way that we talk in the behind the scenes of a show, that would be the greatest show on earth. But it would have to be my own or your own show, because no manufacturer will let us be ourselves. And that's why neither of us work for a manufacturer, because we can't have fun and work at the same time.
Yeah, both of our mouths can get us in trouble.
Very much so. But that's real, right? It's the real. So, hey, if the Kardashians can do it with what they do behind the scenes, we can surely do it for hair color. So we're going to chat. So don't go anywhere.
Okay.
So thank you, everybody, for listening. Have a great day. And I will see you Wednesday, where we're going to talk about what we talked about here, that not all hair color is the same. Yes, it's all designed to be the same, but it is not the same. And you need to know the why behind it. So thanks for listening, and look out for the podcast. It'll be coming out probably next Monday. So be on the lookout for the Ask the Color Expert podcast with Ian. Thanks, guys.
Thank you.